The Senate will come to order. Senator Baumgartner will lead us in prayer. In the
Thank
pledge.
you, Madam President. In prayer. Thank you, Madam President. Will the members in the chamber and the guests join me in the pledge? I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Mr. Majors, would you please take the roll?
Aguilar, Balmer, Baumgartner, Brophy, Cadman, Crowder, Grantham, Guzman, Harvey, Heath, Herpin, Hill, Hodge, John, Johnston,
Excused?
Jones, Kafalis, Kerr, King, Lambert, Lundberg, Marble, Newell, Nicholson, Renfro, Rivera, Roberts, Scheffel, Schwartz, Stedman, Tocktrop, Todd, Ulibarri, Zenzinger. Madam President.
Here. With 34 present, 0 absent, 1 excused, the Senate has a quorum. Motion to adopt the journal, Senator Jones.
Thank you, Madam President. I move that we dispense with the reading of the Journal of May 6th and approve it as corrected by the Secretary. March 6th, excuse me.
The motion, you heard the motion. All in favor say aye. Aye. All opposed, no? No. Ayes have it anyway. Motion is adopted. Committee reports.
March 6, 2014, Committee on Transportation. After consideration of the Merits Committee recommends the following House Bill 1188 be referred to the Committee of the Whole with favorable recommendation, and with the recommendation be placed on the consent calendar. March 6, 2014, Committee on Transportation. After consideration of the Merits Committee recommends the following House Bill 1228 be referred favorably to the Committee on Appropriations. March 6, 2014, Madam President, the Committee on Health and Human Services has had under consideration and has had a hearing on the following appointments and recommends that the appointments be placed on the consent calendar and confirmed. Members of the Hospital Provider Fee Oversight and Advisory Board for a term expiring at the pleasure of the Governor, David R. Livingston of Denver, Colorado, to serve as the Chairman of the Hospital Provider Fee Oversight and Advisory Board, appointed. For terms expiring May 15, 2017, David R. Livingston of Denver, Colorado, a representative of a business that purchases or otherwise provides health insurance for its employees, appointed. Madeline L. Robertson of Greenwood Village, Colorado, an employee of a hospital in Colorado, reappointed. Christopher W. Underwood of Evergreen, Colorado, an employee of the State Department, reappointed.
Senate Services.
March 7, 2014, correctly printed, Senate Joint Memorial 1, Senate Joint Resolution 18, correctly engrossed, Senate Joint Resolution 15, correctly revised, House Bills 1183, 1215, and 1229, correctly enrolled, Senate Bill 83.
Message from the House.
March 6, 2014, Madam President, the House has passed the third reading and transmitted the advisory statute, House Bill 1274. The House has passed the third reading and transmitted the advisory statutes, House Bills 1186 as amended, 1089 as amended, 1148 as amended, 1271 as amended. The House has passed on third reading and returns here with Senate Bills 105, 107, 108, 129, and 60. The House has passed on third reading and transmitted the advisory statute, Senate Bill 59 as amended. March 6, 2014, Madam President, the House has adopted and returns here with Senate Joint Resolution 15.
Message from the reviser.
March 6, 2014, we herewith transmit without comment House Bill 1274 without comment as amended, House Bills 1089, 1148, 1186, and 1271 without comment as amended, Senate Bill 59.
Introduction of bills.
House Bill 1017 by Representative Duran and Senator Ulibarri concerning measures to expand the availability of affordable housing in the state and in connection therewith making modifications to statutory provisions establishing the Housing Investment Trust Fund, the Housing Development Grant Fund, and the Low Income Housing Tax Credit and making an appropriation.
Finance.
House Bill 1182 by Representative Hamner and Senator Kerr concerning changes for the 2015-16 school year to certain public education accountability measures specified in the Education Accountability Act of 2009 to accommodate the transition to administering new statewide assessments.
Education.
House Bill 1206 by Representative Conti and Senator Ulibarri concerning modifications to the Colorado Charitable Solicitations Act and in connection therewith prohibiting certain charitable solicitation practices, modifying the Secretary of State's finding authority, adjusting registration statement requirements, and specifying requirements for appointing registered agents.
State Veterans and Military Affairs.
House Bill 1256 by Representative Fisher and Senator Kerr concerning authorizing institutions of higher education to enter into employment contracts for librarians.
Education. Mr. Majority Leader.
Thank you, Madam President. I move that we proceed out of order for the purpose of considering Senate Joint Resolution 17.
You've heard the motion. All in favor say aye. Opposed, no. Ayes have it. We will proceed out of order to consider Senate Joint Resolution 17. Mr. Majors, would you please read the title to Senate Joint Resolution 17?
Senate Joint Resolution 17 by Senator Schwartz and Representative Hamner concerning national fish hatcheries in Colorado.
Senator Schwartz.
Thank you, Madam President, and I move Senate Joint Resolution 17 and ask that it be read at length.
Mr. Majors, would you please read the resolution at length?
Whereas sport fishing routinely draws more than 725,000 participants in Colorado annually, constituting an important component of Colorado's economy, with angler expenditures exceeding $645 million in 2011. And whereas Colorado Parks and Wildlife received more than $13 million of revenue from the sale of fishing licenses in fiscal year 2012-13, a significant portion of the agency's budget. And whereas trout produced in both state and federal hatchery systems and stocked into waters throughout Colorado are important in maintaining sport fishing and its economic benefits. And whereas the continued operation of the Leadville National Fish Hatchery and the Hotchkiss National Fish Hatchery is essential for the Bureau of Reclamation to fulfill its ongoing obligation to mitigate the negative impacts on fish, wildlife, and recreation created when federal reservoir storage facilities were constructed. And whereas the greenback cutthroat trout, Colorado state fish, was listed by the United States Fish and Wildlife Service as endangered in 1973 and downlisted as a threatened species in 1977 due to the successful conservation efforts by state and federal agencies. And whereas in 2009, following a 5-year review, the U.S. Fish and Wildlife Service determined that the greenback cutthroat trout remains a threatened species due to new threats to the species, including the effects of fire and chemical retardants used in firefighting, increased human population growth within the range of the subspecies, the introduction of non-native species, the fragmentation of genetic isolation of small populations, and the effects of global climate change. And whereas based on current scientific evidence, only one natural greenback cutthroat trout population exists in Colorado, and greenback cutthroat trout management relies on efforts by the state and the Leadville National Fish Hatchery. And whereas the Hotchkiss National Fish Hatchery produces trout to fill needs for federal water development projects throughout western Colorado and northern New Mexico, and plays an important role in fulfilling the mitigation responsibilities from the construction of federal reservoir storage facilities such as Blue Mesa Reservoir. And whereas the Hotchkiss National Fish Hatchery stocks rivers and reservoirs throughout Colorado's western slope with more than 342,000 fish per year, yielding 171,000 angler recreation days. And whereas the Leadville National Fish Hatchery, established in 1889, has stocked waters in Colorado, including military establishments on the Front Range, and in 2011, such stocking created an estimated economic benefit of $3.5 million from recreational fishing. And whereas the Leadville National Fish Hatchery has been successful in rearing and propagating cold water fish, including the threatened greenback cutthroat trout, and serves a key role in returning the fish to its home waters. And whereas the United States Fish and Wildlife Survey recently completed a study predicting that the closure of the Leadville National Fish Hatchery, coupled with funding cuts to the Hotchkiss National Fish Hatchery, will curtail the stocking of Colorado's waters, entailing a loss of associated economic benefits. And whereas the continuation of the Leadville National Fish Hatchery's role as a trout production and recovery facility and the extension of current funding levels for the Hotchkiss National Fish Hatchery are extremely important to Colorado's economy, sport fishing, and the greenback cutthroat trout's recovery. Now, therefore, be resolved by the Senate of the 69th General Assembly of the State of Colorado, the House of Representatives concurring herein, that the General Assembly supports the continued operation of the Leadville National Fish Hatchery and urges the United States Fish and Wildlife Service, in partnership with Colorado Parks and Wildlife, to maintain its current mission of stocking Colorado waters for recreational fishing and the recovery of threatened and endangered species. That the General Assembly supports the operation of the hatchery and adjacent federal lands in a manner that promotes public recreation and scientific research and educational activities. That the General Assembly urges the Bureau of Reclamation to honor its obligation to mitigate the impacts resulting from federal water projects. That the General Assembly urges the Department of Natural Resources and Colorado Parks and Wildlife to work with the United States Fish and Wildlife Service to protect the operation of the Leadville National Fish Hatchery and the Hotchkiss National Fish Hatchery. Be it further resolved that copies of this joint resolution be sent to all members of the Colorado delegation to the United States Congress, the Secretary of the Interior, the Director of the United States Fish and Wildlife Service, and Governor John Hickenlooper.
Senator Schwartz.
And thank you, Madam President. Thank you, members, for listening to an important resolution. I know we have a few anglers in this chamber and folks that are really invested and interested in opportunities for fishing and recreating in our waters and certainly on our western slope. But what we have threatened is the ability for really critical, important resource and an asset in one of our communities in Leadville with the lack of funding. I would also like to welcome, we have one of our commissioners here from Lake County, and this is an important message that we're sending not only to our Department of Natural Resources, but to the federal government. They must continue to fill their obligation when it comes to mitigating the impacts of federal projects and providing fish propagation and stocking in our waters throughout Colorado. And this is an important opportunity for us to recognize what it means, the recreation industry as well as the fishing industry to the state, but not only that, what it means to one of our smallest counties when it comes to a really important asset in terms of recreation, the hatchery, which is a place you all should take time to visit when you're traveling on 124 in Leadville. It's got about 3,000 acres of trails, the fish hatchery, and important historic buildings. So this is an important asset to the state of Colorado. We need our federal partners continue their obligation and continue their funding. And with that, I just would like to welcome Commissioner Bruce Hicks and his wife Mary Lee. If you'd stand and be welcome to the chamber, and just so we know how important this is. There are hundreds of members of the Friends of the Hatchery that were not able to make it today, and we will be joining them actually tonight in Leadville for our town meeting, and would also have our guests recognize that they need to take time and visit the fish hatchery in Lake County, and as long as we have it as a viable asset to the state. Thank you so much. And I moved it.
Is there any further discussion? Question for the body is the adoption of Senate Joint Resolution 17. Are there any no votes? With 34 ayes, 0 no, 0 absent, 1 excuse, Senate Joint Resolution 17 is adopted. Senator Schwartz.
And thank you, Madam President. I ask that the morning roll call be added as co-sponsors.
There is objection. Co-sponsors on Senate Joint Resolution 17, Mr. Majority Leader, Senators Ulibarri, Hodge, Newell, Todd, Nicholson, Zenzinger, Kafalis, Madam President Pro Tem, Senator Harvey, Senators Aguilar, Jones, Shuffle, Crowder, Herpin, King, Brophy, Roberts, John, Talk Drop. Your rubber band ball is getting bigger, Senator Talk Drop. Please add the president. Third reading of bills, consent calendar. Mr. Majors, would you please read the titles to all the bills on third reading consent calendar?
House Bill 1229 by Representatives Kagan and Wright and Senators Johnston and King concerning authorizing sharing information between state and local government agencies related to legal marijuana. House Bill 1215 by Representative Janal and Senator Talk Drop concerning the ability of a federal home loan bank to enforce its rights with regard to collateral subject to a security agreement. House Bill 1183 by Representative Fields and Senator Jones concerning the reinstatement of the authority for active military personnel to practice professionally.
Mr. Majority Leader.
Thank you, Madam President. I move the adoption of all the bills and third reading of bills consent calendar, which includes House Bills 1112, 1051, 1190, and 1174.
Mr. Majority Leader, I think we're using different bill numbers.
Excuse me. Okay. My bad, Madam President. Let's try again. It's House Bills 1229, 1215, and 1183.
Okay, you've heard the motion. Is there any discussion on any of the bills on third reading consent calendar? Discussion or vote? Vote. Okay, the question is the adoption of the bills listed on third reading consent calendar. Are there any no votes on any of the bills on third reading consent? Senator Marble.
Thank you, Madam President. I wish to be a no on House Bill 1183.
Senator Marble will be a no on House Bill 1183. Any other no votes on any of the bills on consent? Okay. With 34 ayes, 0 noes, 0 absent, and 1 excused, House Bill 1229 is adopted. Co-sponsors. With 34 ayes, 0 noes, 0 absent, and 1 excused, House Bill 1215 is adopted. Co-sponsors. With 33 ayes, 1 no, 0 absent, and 1 excused, House Bill 1183 is adopted. Co-sponsors. Senators Kafalas, Aguilar, John, Zenzinger, Newell, Kerr, Schwartz, Todd, Ulibarri, Mr. Majority Leader. Senators Balmer, Roberts, Herpin, Rivera, Grantham, King. Please add the president. General orders, second reading of bills, consent calendar. Mr. Majority Leader.
Thank you, Madam President. I request that House Bill 1172 be removed from today's consent calendar and placed at the end of today's general order, second reading of bills calendar.
House Bill 1172 will be removed from today's consent calendar, placed at the end of today's general orders, reading bills calendar. General orders, second reading of bills. Senator Schwartz. You've heard the motion. All in favor say aye. Aye. Opposed, no. Ayes have it. The Senate will resolve itself into a committee of the whole for purpose of considering general orders, second reading of bills, and Senator Schwartz will take the chair.
Thank you. The committee will come to order. The court rule is relaxed. Mr. Majors, would you please read the title to Senate Bill 125?
Senate Bill 125 by Senators John and Harvey and Representatives Pabon and Sabo concerning the regulation of transportation network companies and in connection therewith requiring transportation network companies to carry liability insurance, conduct background checks on transportation network company drivers, inspect transportation network company vehicles, and obtain a permit from the Public Utilities Commission.
Senators John and Harvey. Senator Harvey.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I move Senate Bill 125, the Business Affairs and Labor Committee report, and the Appropriations Committee report.
To the Business, Labor, and Technology Committee report.
Thank you, Madam Chair. The Business Affairs and Labor Committee report was a rather lengthy discussion and amendments dealing with a number of the issues that the director of the PUC brought forward as suggestions that we put into the bill. As you all know, this is the Transportation Network Company bill. I'm going to just go through it real quick. On page 1, lines 2 through 3, we're saying that on the receipt, electronic receipt that all of the riders get, that in that receipt, that the riders will have on that receipt the driver's first name and phone number, so that if there was ever something left in the car, phone, iPad, wallet, whatever, that the rider would have the ability to contact the driver and be able to contact them to get their stuff back. Lines 4 through 6, we wanted to make sure that the drivers were not driving more than 8 hours in any 24-hour period. And so this language here is what the director of the PUC suggested for language to be able to ensure that drivers aren't driving more than 8 hours a day or in excess of 70, what did that come up to? About 80 hours a week. Then lines 8 through 9 was language that I wanted to make sure that we had in there to say that the individual rider or driver, when he becomes a TNC driver, may not have the full coverage that they currently have under their private insurance. A lot of the discussion that we had about 10 years ago when we went from no-fault insurance to tort insurance was that you were going to be going from having a ton of coverage to barely any coverage. And during that time period, I was very worried about that, and I wanted to make sure that we notified every single policyholder that they were going to have a significant change in their policies. And so I required that we have a notification in statute that every policyholder is notified of that. I insisted that this bill also have that for the drivers, that if they are going to become a TNC driver, that they understand that their personal insurance may be significantly more coverage than what the TNC coverage is. So I wanted to make sure that we said that. Then on the next page, on page 2, lines 3 and 4, that's dealing with the background checks, the car insurance, keeping all of those things on file. We require that the taxi cab industry and the cab industry keep those different items for a certain number of months. This is putting in place and codifying in place that the TNCs will have to keep all of their information for all of their drivers, the background checks, the auto insurance, and everything at the same time periods that we are doing for the taxi cabs and for the limo drivers. Lines 5 through 8 on page 2, we're talking about the criminal history checks and how that will be what we will be looking for in those criminal background checks. On page 2, line 11 through 13, says the person who has within the immediate preceding 5 years been convicted or pled nolo contendere to a felony shall not serve as a driver. We didn't have that in the original bill, so we wanted to make sure that that was the case. On page 2, lines 20 through 25, the commission may deny an application under this Part 6 or refuse to renew the permit of a transportation network company based on a determination that the transportation network company has not satisfied a civil penalty. And the reason why we wanted to put that in there is because just because they tell the company that they can't do business, there's no penalty in the current statute to give the PUC the authority to levy any fines, and so this is a way that the PUC has the ability to enforce this statute. And then on page 3, at the end of that, on lines 20 through 25, we're talking about what livery service is, and livery service is when an individual is logged into the network and makes a connection between a rider and a driver, and that is when we define what livery service is, meaning you've hailed a ride. We have amendments to deal with that issue as well coming forward, but that essentially is the Business Affairs and Labor Report, taking most of the suggestions from the PUC and others, the taxi cab industry, the limo industry, and trying to come together on making the regulations somewhat similar. And so with that, I would move the Business Affairs and Labor Committee report.
Is there any further discussion of the Business, Labor, and Technology Committee report? I think that must be a remnant from the House, your reference to the committee, Senator Harvey. So is there any further discussion of the Business, Labor, and Technology report? Seeing none, the motion before us is the adoption of the Business, Labor, and Technology report. All those in favor say aye. Aye. Those opposed? The committee report is adopted. To the Appropriations Committee report. Senator Harvey.
Thank you, Madam Chair. The Appropriations Committee report is dealing with the cost of regulations for TNCs, and the PUC says it's going to cost about $215,000 to implement this bill and to regulate the TNCs this year. And so the current 2 companies that are wanting to do business in the state of Colorado have agreed to split that cost, the $215,000 cost. But if others come in, then we will prorate that cost back to the TNCs and allocate it accordingly to the new companies that come in, so that there is no fiscal impact to the general fund for this bill. The TNCs are willing to pay it themselves to get into the market here in Colorado. So with that, I move the Appropriations Committee report.
Is there further discussion of the Appropriations Committee report? Seeing none, the motion before us is the adoption of the Appropriations Committee report. All those in favor say aye. Aye. Those opposed? The committee report is adopted. To the bill, Senator John.
Thank you, Madam Chair. And just very quickly, I do want to spend just a couple of minutes going through what has this bill been all about. What are these transportation network companies, and why are they here? You know, this is an economy driven by entrepreneurship, innovation, and hard work, and Colorado is a known leader for startups, for tech companies, and as a state that welcomes innovation. And this so perfectly describes the groups that have decided to come to Colorado. It's an entirely new class of jobs and bringing a good economic force to our state. These drivers work when they want to work. Most drivers work about 10 hours a week. They work the hours they want while the kids are in school, so the parent can be a full-time parent but still earn a good income. They work independently and do not have to pay thousands of dollars to a big company in lease and rent payments. Who are these independent jobs for? Well, like I said, moms, dads, the guardians that want to be home with the kids and not have to be away all day. College students who are just trying to make ends meet while they go to college and need the flexibility, the hours. Retirees, you know, when the economy crashed, so did the income of a lot of retirees. And so they are now depending on part-time jobs, and this gives them additional income. Some drivers do want to work full-time, and this allows them to do that. Of course, they will be regulated under the PUC, and as Senator Harvey said, it'll be, the hours are regulated there. So this is an innovative new business model that is embracing technology and a new way of reaching consumers. Giving choice to consumers, this is about providing options that are affordable, dependable, and convenient. There was a poll done by, Talmy Drake Research in January of 2014, and I think that the results of that is actually very interesting. 89% of the voters surveyed never or almost never use a traditional taxi. This is for a whole new era, and we're finding that it's a lot of the younger folks that are using these services. 5% of those voters surveyed say they have used the Uber Lyft type service in a short time that has been around, and 74% say they like it better than the traditional taxi service. 72% of the voters surveyed say they would tell their state representative or senator to support legislation that would have them regulated under the PUC to be able to offer this new type. So it's a very interesting survey, and it really does say this is really not in competition with the taxis. These are folks that really have never used a taxi service. How does this app thing work? A lot of people have said, how does that work? Well, it's on the smartphone. It shows you which participating, once you hit on the app, it shows you which participating drivers are close, and it also gives you an estimate of time of how long it would take to get the ride. You will also get a price for that ride before you go anywhere. And you will also, very importantly for safety, you will see a picture of that driver and that car before you go anywhere. So how safe are these drivers in service? And many people have asked us these questions. Well, they'll be regulated under the PUC. There will be and are criminal background checks that are done prior to being hired. Right now, there's a waiting time if you're hired on in the taxi cab world. You're hired on, and then there's a certain period of time that you have to do that criminal background check. This is done prior to being hired. You will know this person has passed extensive backgrounds. Convictions within the past 7 years of driving under the influence of drugs or alcohol will not be permitted. Persons convicted of fraud, sex offenses, the use of motor vehicles to commit a felony, a crime involving property damage, theft, acts of violence will not be approved. The driving record must be approved prior to hire. Any person who has more than 3 moving violations in 3 years or a major violation in a 3-year period will not be approved. The vehicles will have inspections. They will have to have primary insurance. The regulatory fees will be paid by those companies. We have an amendment that also will satisfy the lending institutions that have a loan out on that car. There will be consumer disclosures on insurance issues. There is no street hailing allowed. People say, well, they could do it anyway. Well, it'll be against the law. They can't hover and pick up at the airport. Not allowed. And what have the disabled community said? We've talked to people in the disabled community, and this is important to both the senator from Highlands Ranch and I. Some have said, one in particular said, it's so nice to be able to stay inside out of the rain, the snow, the cold, and watch on my app as the car is approaching, and I can go out to catch my ride at the front door instead of sitting in the rain and the cold and the snow. A blind person told us, it is so nice to be able to count on a ride that has been through criminal background checks, who takes the credit card because it's already something I have submitted in my app, and I know they have not shorted me on money when I've given cash, because they don't take cash. So they get the right amount of money back. And it was so nice to have the driver help me into the car because I am disabled, because I have a walker. Help me into the car take my walker, put it into the back, and go back around and help me out of the car and into my destination to help take care of me. It was nice having the ride come right to me and not watch a Cessa ride drive right by me. Change is not easy. The success of a company is consumer-driven, as it should be. Just imagine what would have happened to IBM first opening in 1880 if there had been no willingness to move forward and to continually look at their business model as technologies changed. They had to completely rewrite the business plan and the business model to stay at the top. And they had some pretty awful times in the 80s due to other competition. What would have happened to us today had they just said, I'm done, and not been so willing to go to a new business model? Well, they didn't give up, and that gave us the IBM personal computer. In the 1990s, they had to completely rebuild their product line to stay in the game and compete. Another industry wasn't so willing to do that. Let's talk about for 2 quick seconds, the whip and buggy manufacturing era. They forgot to look at it as a transportation issue. They stayed focused on it's about the whips and the buggies. There's one still in business today because they expanded their thoughts. They expanded their business model, and they're still in business today because they saw a need to match what the consumers were asking for. It is the company that must adapt to the consumer wants and needs. It is our job to be sure there are consumer protections, and we believe we have done that. We have spent weeks and hours with all of those seeking input that have come to us, asked for a meeting, and sat down with us to discuss a concern. And we believe that we have addressed those concerns. Those are the parts to Senate Bill 125. And we have yet more amendments to address the issues that have been brought to us.
Is there further discussion of Senate Bill 125? Senator Harvey? Mr. Majors, there's an amendment on the desk. Would you please read Amendment L021?
Amendment L021 to Senate Bill 125 by Senators John Harvey, Carroll, Cadman, and Gonzalez, amend Prison
Senator
Labor Tech.
Harvey.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I move Amendment 21 to Senate Bill 125, the John, Harvey, Carroll, Cadman, Kafalis, Scheffel, Crowder, Baumgardner amendment. And members, we have been working, as you know, this has been on the calendar for 3 weeks, 4 weeks. We've been working to try to come to an understanding of what would be the best way to move forward with this bill. And I want to give a little nod to a big nod to the President of the Senate. She has taken a lot of time out of her schedule to meet with both sides, all sides on this issue, and come to know this bill as well as Senator John and I, which is a huge learning curve because this is a very new technology and new business model here in Colorado. And she worked very hard to try to come to an agreement that I believe is a unique way to try to solve some of these issues. As you all know, the main issues regarding this bill is the insurance issue, and when does insurance stop for your private insurance, and when does insurance start for the TNCs? And what kind of insurance should the TNCs have, and what kind of insurance do they currently have? And so let me tell you how the current system is working. Right now, if you have private insurance, your insurance coverage is for any time you are in the car and for any time you have any family members or any guests in your car. But as soon as you have somebody in your car that is paying you for a ride, then your private insurance right now will not cover you or your riders or your vehicle when you have somebody in your car for hire. That's the way your policies are written right now. When you have these new TNC businesses, what does that mean? How is that going to impact your personal private insurance? Well, what TNCs are, it's a smartphone application. And so individuals sign up to be a driver with a TNC, and they fill out the paperwork on their app or on their laptop, and they provide the background information so they can do a background check. They provide proof of insurance. They provide all of the things that we as a society would want to make sure they have: safe cars, insurance, everything. And then once they pass that background check, then they become a driver for the TNCs. And then they are a driver with an app on the TNC's technology. Then a potential rider can go on to the app, whether with regards to Uber or Lyft. They can click on one of those apps and say, I want to be picked up at the Capitol on East Colfax. And then once those connections are made and a driver and a rider are connected, then that is when the company's insurance goes into effect. Currently, the way the company's insurance is written is that they are an umbrella insurance policy. So if the personal insurance provider says they aren't going to cover these situations, then the company's insurance will come into effect. The President of the Senate and I agree that that's probably not the best way to go about it. And Senator John and I and Cadman and Catfalis believe that the company's insurance policy should be primary, not just a second-in-line policy, umbrella policy, if the private insurance says they won't cover it. No, as soon as there is a connection between the driver and the rider, the company should be primary insurance provider, and anything that happens between that connection when the driver is going to pick up the rider, anytime the rider is in the car, all the way to the point where the rider is out of the car, that company should be the primary insurance provider. That is what this amendment says. That's going to be a pretty significant cost to the TNCs. Because right now, not being the primary insurance provider, that's a pretty inexpensive coverage. Even though it's $1 million coverage, that's pretty inexpensive. But as soon as they become the primary, that's going to cost the TNCs some money. But I believe, we all believe, that that is protecting the citizens of the state of Colorado, to ensure that we know who is the insurance provider. And if the TNCs want to do business in Colorado, that's the deal. There's a cost to doing business. Having said that, we also understand that the private insurance providers have their current insurance policy that says you won't cover once there is a rider, but there is that area that when the app is on, a driver may be driving around with the app on. Are they going to the grocery store with their app on? Or are they looking for a rider with their app on? It's impossible to tell. So what we have also said in this bill is that insurance, in this amendment, is that private insurance providers can re-rate their insurance upon renewal and ask, if you ask the question, we already ask your age, your car, how many miles you usually drive, but they can also ask, are you also a TNC driver? If you are a TNC driver, then that will allow the insurance companies to be able to rate adjust to increase their premiums to justify the minuscule but potential liability that is there. I think that is a appropriate way to move forward on this. That is essentially what Amendment 21 is, and I would ask for an aye vote on Amendment 21.
Is there further discussion of Amendment 21? President Carroll.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Thank you, members. I think the sponsors have done a very good job describing the amendment. I would just come down to say that I also support Amendment L021 and want to thank the sponsors and a lot of different folks for weighing in to try and make sure that we really have a bright line of coverage between personal and when you've got passengers in the car, and would just also ask for the support, but reiterate my thanks to everyone for their long and hard work and time on this amendment.
Further discussion of Amendment 21? The motion before us is the adoption of Amendment L021. All those in favor say aye. Aye. Those opposed? Amendment 21 is adopted. Mr. Majors, there's an amendment on the desk. Would you please read Amendment L022?
Amendment L022 to Senate Bill 125 by Senator John Amend, the Business Labor Technology Committee report dated February 11.
Senator Harvey.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I move Amendment 002 to Senate Bill 125.
So, excuse me, Senator Harvey, restate that motion.
I move Amendment 022 to Senate Bill 125.
Thank you.
Is that not right?
No, you said 002.
Oh, I'm sorry.
No problem. That's correct. Thank you.
Okay. This amendment simply says that the Transportation Network Company's insurance policy must provide coverage at all times that the driver is engaged in a pre-arranged ride. And what that means is whenever there is a connection between the driver and the rider, that is when the primary insurance will take effect. I move the amendment and ask for an aye vote.
Is there further discussion of Amendment 022? Seeing none, all those in favor of Amendment 022, please say aye. Aye. Those opposed? Amendment 022 is adopted.
Yeah.
Mr. Major, there is an amendment on the desk. Would you please read Amendment L020?
Amendment L020, Senate Bill 125 by Senator Harvey, amend the Business Labor Technology Committee report dated February 11, 2014, page 1 after line 15.
Senator Harvey.
Insert.
Thank you, Madam Chair. And this amendment is going back to the disclosures that I wanted to have, that I was requiring to have in the application that the drivers sign up for to say what their coverage will have or will not have. Because what the TNC's coverage has is limited liability insurance, but it's not collision insurance. And for all of you who have a loan on your car, your lender requires you to have collision insurance on the asset that they are lending you money on. And the TNCs may not have collision coverage, but what the Uber and Lyft do have is they do have collision insurance for those drivers that have collision insurance to ensure that if there is an accident, that their driver's collision insurance is coverage just for those that have collision insurance. So it's very complicated, but that's what it does. What this says is on that application, when the drivers are signing up to be a driver, that they also must click off that they understand they need to let their lender, their bank or whomever, know that they are driving for a TNC. So if there is an accident with their car that the bank has a loan against, that the banks will know that who they need to contact to get the check to cover their loss on their collateral that they have a loan against. So that's all this amendment says, and I would ask for an aye vote.
Senator Harvey, would you please move the amendment?
I'm sorry. I move Amendment 020 to Senate Bill 125.
Is there further discussion of Amendment L020? Seeing none, the motion before us is the adoption of Amendment L020. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Those opposed? Amendment L020 is adopted. There's an amendment on the desk. Mr. Majors, would you please read Amendment L023?
Amendment L023, Senate Bill 125 by Senator Harvey.
Senator Harvey.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I move Amendment 023 to Senate Bill 125. I want to go back real quick to the part about currently the insurance company's insurance policy is not primary insurance coverage. It is an umbrella insurance policy that comes into effect when the private insurance company's insurance policy is denied. The bill says we're going to say that has to be a primary insurance policy. Well, it's not right now, and the insurance companies have to go back and figure out all of the wording to make that happen. It can't happen overnight. This bill has an emergency clause, what's the phrase? A safety clause on it. And if we say it goes into effect upon the governor's signature next week, the insurance provider is not going to have the time to put that primary insurance wording together. So we're allowing for that portion of the bill to not take effect, for the primary insurance to take effect until July 1st of 2014, to allow the TNCs and their insurance providers to figure out the language necessary for their policy. And that's all this amendment does. And I move again Amendment 23 and ask for an aye vote.
Is there any further discussion of Amendment 23? Seeing none. All those in favor of Amendment 23, please say aye.
Aye.
Those opposed? Amendment 23 is adopted. Senator Harvey.
Thank you, Madam Chair. That is all the amendments that Senator John and I have brought forward, all the amendments that Senator Kafalis, John, Harvey, Carroll, anybody else, Cadman, et al. Are bringing forward. I want to thank everybody for your patience and your diligence on learning this issue. This is an interesting bill that is bringing forward a new market to Colorado that could be a lot of jobs throughout the state of Colorado. I think it's an important bill, and it is something that has to be done, or these businesses will be put out of business because the PUC says that they are acting outside of the law. And without this bill, they will not be able to continue to do business. So I appreciate everybody's patience. I appreciate everybody's work on this that have helped me with these amendments, helped Senator John and I with these amendments. And with that, that is the bill. And I move the bill as amended. Ask for an aye vote.
Further discussion of Senate Bill 125, Senator Aguilar.
Hi, thank you, Madam Chair, and Senators John and Harvey for bringing this bill forward. Two things. One is, I did want to mention that actually it is correct that people who are blind and not physically disabled support this strongly, but I do want to emphasize that there have been negative impacts on the availability of accessible taxis in San Francisco for people who require wheelchairs, electric wheelchairs in particular. And I don't know that it's the job of this bill to take care of that, but I do want to bring that up for people because I think we may need to look at what we might do to ensure that we don't disincentivize the existence of vehicles that can carry people who are in electric wheelchairs. And again, I don't know that that can be handled under the title of this bill, but I think something we need to think about going forward because it has been shown in other areas. The other thing I just wondered is, I'm presuming that if you work for Uber by turning on your app, they give you a 1099, or do they employ you? Some way in which that income and transfer of money is tracked. And then I do notice that you asked people to take a look at their driving record. What I'm wondering is, I think people who drive taxis and limos have to actually take a HERDIC license exam. And was there any discussion about the value of requiring that as well?
Senator Harvey?
Thank you. To your first question, they are 1099. Every single driver for one of these companies is a private contractor. All they do is go on to the app and voluntarily become a driver for the app, if you will. With regards to the HERDIC license, no, the HERDIC licenses are not required under this. HERDIC licenses are actually administered at the municipal level. So to become a taxi driver in Denver, Denver will require you to get a HERDIC license. If you are a taxi driver in Loveland, they may not require you to get a HERDIC license. And that's up to Denver to decide how they want to handle these TNCs and if they want to require them to have a HERDIC license or not. That's not a part of our responsibility.
Further discussion, Senator Ulibarri.
Thank you, Madam Chair, and thank you to the bill sponsors for bringing this forward. I think it's important that we're having this conversation now to address the issues that are coming up. And I think the status quo of how these businesses are currently regulated is inappropriate, so I'm glad that we're having the conversation about how to move this forward. I do, however, rise with a similar concern as was raised by the good senator from Denver about the accessibility of transit, specifically for folks who use ambulatory devices like power chairs, wheelchairs, or others. And I share her sentiment as well that this bill is not the bill necessarily for us to figure out the larger issue of the lack of accessible transit. However, I am concerned by the data I saw presented from San Francisco, which has had this kind of technology in use for a much longer period of time, that showed that when TNCs were allowed to operate under a similar regulatory structure, it meant that there was a decrease in cab access, specifically accessible for people using wheelchairs or other ambulatory aids, that there was a significant decrease of folks then had major transit issues. When you have a transit system, public transit system like buses or light rail, that only run on limited schedules or limited times, most folks who use taxis currently are folks with disabilities or other impairments for their own ability to drive. And so I wanted to just raise my concern that I think this has highlighted for me a bigger structural issue, that we do not have adequate infrastructure for people with disabilities, specifically as it relates to transportation. I'll continue to monitor that issue and try and work on that issue. Wanted to raise it, though. Thank you for bringing the bill.
Further discussion of Senate Bill 125? I think Senator Hill would like to speak. Senator Hill.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Colleagues, I'm deeply concerned about this bill. I don't get it. We heard it's a dynamic new business, so we need to regulate them. We heard if we don't do it, the PUC is going to shut them down. Since when does the PUC have constitutional authority to say who can and can't pick someone up and take them somewhere else as part of a private contract? I heard that this bill is going to create lots of jobs. It's a dynamic new industry. Friends, this bill doesn't create new jobs. Uber and Lyft have already created the new jobs, and PUC is threatening to shut them down. The PUC wants to kill these new jobs that we have stood up. I say this as someone who's deeply concerned about Uber and Lyft. I think I've used Uber probably more than anyone else in this room, maybe more than everyone else in this room combined. I have, the last time I checked, I have over 193 trips logged on Uber over the last couple of years. This is not something where we need new regulation. Let me just read some of this stuff. I'm concerned that we've bought into, well, an unhealthy approach to government's role. I'll just read the title. Concerning the regulation of transportation network companies and in connection therewith requiring transportation network companies to carry liability insurance. Is that an individual mandate or is that a corporate mandate? Conduct background checks on transportation network company drivers. I didn't know we were going to have background checks up in this legislative session again. Inspect transportation network company vehicles and obtain a permit from the Public Utilities Commission. Colleagues, we've got a fantastic opportunity here for something dynamic, something new. When you ride on these, when you ride an Uber, I've made it a point to talk to just about every single driver I possibly can and ask them what their experience is like. Ask them, what has it been like? And I was actually out in D.C. a couple of weeks ago riding with Mohammed from Afghanistan. And he was talking about how he came over in the 70s. He's been driving taxis for over 20 years, providing for his family, and just a year and a half ago switched over to Uber. I said, well, what's it been like? He said, Owen, he said, this has been one of the best experiences of my life. For the first time in the last 25 years, my wife is not concerned about my safety. I used to have to worry about someone getting out of the car and not paying me, or getting in the car and threatening to do something. Now, it's fantastic. All the drivers are pre-screened. All the passengers are pre-screened. We don't change cash. I don't carry cash around with me. Credit cards have taken care of all of it. I'm safer now. My family is safer because of this. I said, interesting. How much more do you work? He said, oh, and I work actually a lot less. I work less than I've ever worked before because now I get to set my own hours. I can just log in. I don't have to clock in anywhere. All I have to do is pull my phone out, click in, and I'm ready to go. And I don't have to go and start at a certain spot. I can start wherever I am and start working from right there. So I work less hours. I said, interesting, how much money you're making? Because I've heard that, that this hurts the amount of money and that Uber takes more money out of this. And he said, no, exactly the opposite. This last year was the most money I've ever made in all my time in the United States driving cars. He said, because once again, I don't have to worry about people not paying me. I don't have to worry about if I have to be at the right place at the right time, so I get a phone call from a dispatch company. Instead, I can go what I know to be good routes. I can go, he said, I know where to be on Thursday afternoon when Congress gets out. I know exactly, I can make these decisions for myself rather than waiting for a dispatcher to make these decisions for me. He said, actually, it used to be I had to pay off dispatchers. If I was on the clock, dispatchers would expect an extra tip to get more calls. So this has empowered me to make more money, to work less, and to be safer. And now we want to buy into the threat of the PUC to say they're going to shut them down. Friends, this is not the role of the PUC. This is exactly the problem we have right now. You can hear stories in Fort Collins and Loveland about how we only have one taxi company. And we have DUI problems because of it. Why do we have DUI problems because of it? Well, the PUC hasn't allowed more taxi companies to come and operate. Well, so how are we buying into the exact same mentality by regulating dynamic new businesses that empower the drivers, that empower the passengers, that increase profits for the drivers, that increase convenience for the passengers? This is a win-win, and we seek to undo that quickly. These are fast-moving, versatile businesses, and now we want to pull them under the regulation and control of the legislature. Let me read a couple of more lines in here. I'm deeply concerned about it. I'm not sure how, again, whether Democrat or Republican, I'm not sure, but I'm not sure how we support this. Let me just read the last page. It says, a person shall not operate a transportation network company in Colorado without having first obtained a permit from the commission. I'm concerned my wife needs to be regulated under this role. She spends way too much time driving friends around in exchange for making meals. She doesn't like cooking. She's happy to drive friends around. Does she need to be regulated under here? The commission shall issue a permit to each transportation network company that meets the requirements of this Part 6 and pays a permit fee of $325 to the commission. The permit is valid for 1 year. Friends, we took a pledge to not sign new permit fees. This falls under Tabor. Right? We don't get to put in new fees. We don't get to put these things in. This is not our task. This should be up to the voters. The commission shall determine the form and manner of application for a transportation network company permit. The commission shall set and adjust by rule, not by legislation, but by rule, by their fiat, the permit application fee, and may adjust by rule the annual permit fee to cover the commission's direct and indirect costs associated with this Part 6. Colleagues, since when do we like the idea of, by rule, setting new fees and new regulations on dynamic, growing businesses that offer jobs, that empower people, that increase the profits for the drivers, that increase the convenience for the passengers, that make the families safer? I'll keep going. The commission may take action against the transportation network company as set forth in Section including issuing an order to cease and desist and suspending, revoking, altering, or amending a permit issued to the Transportation Network Company for a violation of this Part 6 or a failure to comply with a commission order, decision, or rule, again, not legislation, but this is a rule issued by the commission, issued under this part, a Transportation Network Company is subject to a penalty not to exceed $2,000 for each offense. The commission shall not assess a penalty against the Transportation Network Company driver. Colleagues, we're empowering a commission here to come and stifle and put a wet blanket on a dynamic new opportunity in Colorado. Not only that, let's go on to some of the other rules in here. Now we have to, we just passed an amendment, 020, a Transportation Network Company shall make the following disclosure to a prospective driver in the prospective driver's terms of service. These are private contracts, but now we, as a legislature, are forcing them to have these lines in there. Since when do we support, colleagues, getting involved in these private contracts and telling them what they have to know, what they must do? There's another concern here, and I could talk some more about the importance of dynamic growing businesses and not subjecting them to regulation and to the unconstitutional authority that the PUC already exercises. Representative Melton has introduced a bill to ban using smartphone devices while you're driving a car. So under this regulation now and under the PUC, are we going to ban Uber? Are we going to ban UberX? Are we going to ban Lyft? Because now you're no longer allowed to use the app. The driver's no longer allowed to use the app. Is that going to become illegal now too? Colleagues, this is the problem with government. This is the problem. We are here to make sure there's equal protection under the law, that there's stable laws, that we don't use government to stifle new businesses and new opportunities. Friends, what would happen? What would have happened if we'd have tried to pass this a couple of years ago? How many of you have used Uber? How many people have used UberX? How many people have used Lyft? What if we tried to pass this a couple of years ago before these had come into existence and said, you know what, we're not even going to let them spin up. We're not going to allow these new businesses. We're not going to allow the new opportunities. Friends, you wouldn't have the testimonies for thousands of drivers out there now, not just in Denver, but across the United States, to say, this has been a better opportunity for my family. I've made more money. I've had more freedom. I've had greater safety. And for all the passengers out there, how many people had a good experience the last time they tried to use a taxi? How many people had a good experience when they said, hey, I'm going to